Hello, squad. Welcome back. I'm here again today with the lovely Helen, who is gracing us with her presence. She has a YouTube channel over at Clueless Fangirl. The links will be in the description. So if you haven't subbed to her already, what are you doing? Go sub. She's doing a video series on the three elven clans. That would be the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri, aka everybody else. And we've been, as a related project, we decided to do some conversations on those clans, and we did the Vanyar over on her channel a couple weeks ago, and last week we started to do the Noldor, and we made it about to Gondolin and ran out of time. So this is actually our part 2 of our discussion of the Noldor, our favorite clan, obviously, since we keep talking about them. And depending on how far we get today, there may be a part 3. There's a lot to say, and I don't think anyone wants to be rushed here.
No, exactly. And it's funny that we didn't even come halfway through after, I don't know, almost 2 hours talking. But apparently there were people in the chat saying they listened to all of it in your comment section. So yeah, people are apparently also into the Noldor as much as we are.
I would hope so. They certainly deserve it. And yeah, I think even if you can't watch the whole video, or maybe not all in one sitting, hopefully people will find something to enjoy here, because we I think we both have a lot of passion for this topic, as has been demonstrated. Mm-hmm. So we left off. I suppose we should sort of run down what we covered in the first talk, so people kind of know where we are. We covered kind of who the Noldor are, the second of the 3 tribes to sort of awaken. We talked about some of their drama, their family drama in Valinor, and their eventual departure from Valinor and return to what we would know as Middle-earth. And some of their early adventures there. We talked a lot about Feanor. We discussed Finwë and his 2 wives, which is a very unusual situation. And I think we ended pretty much examining a pretty thorough examination of the Gondolin story with first Arathel and Maeghlin, and then Arathel's death and the founding, all the way through the eventual fall of Gondolin, which happens, of course, very late in the second age, or in the third age. Oh my gosh, late in the first age, almost to the second age. Where is my brain? All right, so that
it's the weekend. It's okay, Lexi.
I guess. Yeah, for you it really is. For you it really is the weekend. It's just Friday's just starting here.
I'm from the future, so future looks bright.
Well, that's a relief, I have to say. Although I might appreciate some shade at this point. So that is in over 2 hours. That is, I think, about as far as we got. So one of the things that I think a good sort of starting point or transition is discussing, as we just covered, Gondolin. Gondolin was, of course, one of 2 cities founded after that sort of prophetic message from Ulmo. The other one, of course, being Nargothrond, founded by Finrod, who is Galadriel's brother. So I think that's where we're kicking off, is with him, and of course his eventual entanglement with a very famous couple. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Silmarils, and here, because Gondolin, we said the Silmarils don't really play an important role in the fall of Gondolin, which I kind of like, because it's more, gives it more, obviously, all the fades are interwoven and everything, but Gondolin is more of a standalone. And yes, Gondolin needed to exist, so Earendil could be born and all that, but I like that there are stories that are not just entangled and completely interwoven in the storyline of the Silmarils and Feanor's Oath and the Flight of the Noldor and all that. So I kind of like that, although obviously the king is a Noldor, a Noldorian prince even, and High King of the Noldor, but I kind of liked the differentiation. And here in Nargothrond we now get completely the Sons of Feanor play an important role here, taking over the city and stuff like that. I like that, although these, the dreams they were given, and in the beginning you could think, this is very, there are a lot of similarities, but actually it's not. Gondolin and Nargothrond have complete, yes, they both fall, again, spoiler, sorry. But it's for very different reasons, and they're very different players in that story. And I really like that it's not always the same people, responsible for things.
AKA the Feanorians.
Yes.
Yes. Responsible for the things.
I didn't want to,
No, I know.
You pushing at minute 2.
don't want to call them out this early in the discussion, but they will feature very heavily today. And yeah, I think, people talk a lot about sort of some of the great stories. These were the ones that Tolkien and Chris Tolkien identified as the great stories of the Silmarillion.
The 3 great stories, yes.
And these are the ones that were published kind of as almost standalones. Mm-hmm. The Gondolin story, the Children of Húrin, which is a very heavily mortal-based story. There's not, he kind of gets entangled with some of the Sindar, but not really any Noldor personally for Turin.
Yeah, well, he was in Nargothrond.
He comes to Nargothrond. That's going to come up.
And he's also responsible for the fall, actually, but, you know...
See, we can finally blame someone who's not Feanor. It only took, Turin, the absolute master of disaster, to draw some of that blame away.
Yeah, I'm very fast in blaming Turin, and, with, Doriath blaming dwarves and blaming Turin is my favorite part-time activity.
I appreciate that so much. My personal theory on Turin is that Morgoth didn't actually curse him. He just made really terrible decisions. Yes. And
Yes. And this is Tolkien showing us, there was we're going off topic, but this is really important to me.
Have to save Turin.
I know, but this is really important to me because I do think this is what I understand. And everybody, can have their own opinion and understand something different and see something and read something different into the Turin story. For me, it always shows the path of humanity. You have this choice. You could choose either this path or this path, and there are very often there's 1 or 2 points of no return for him, right? But very often during the story, he could have, turned events and go back and stuff and you always see these options he has, but he always makes the bad choice. And I think this is what Tolkien wants to show us with the Turin story. And I don't think it's the curse. I really do think it's when you think, okay, somebody tells you, in 25 years, I don't know, your family will be doomed or whatever because of this and this and this. Do you live your life differently than you would live it not knowing it, right? Would you make different decisions and all that? And I do think this is the Turin Turambar story. And don't be influenced by some random evil dude telling you this, because you're the master of your own fate. And we do see some curses, yes, come to pass, but some curses don't. And you can make curses or things even worse. And those people like Morgoth and Sauron were master manipulators, right? And them cursing and them foretelling events, do you really believe that? Do you have to believe that? Or can you choose a different path? This is, for me, in a nutshell, the Turin Turambar story. And I think he is a big, big failure, and that's not a bad thing. But it makes a good story, but,
well, it's bad for Turin.
Yes.
And everyone he comes into contact with. But yes, I see your point. And I think it's interesting that Tolkien chooses to start the story of Turin with this debate between Húrin and Morgoth. And Húrin, of course, being this very stalwart, trained by the elves. He has a very high, for a man of the first age, a very high understanding of the sort of theological, philosophical fate questions that come up. And Morgoth says, look, you will see that I have control over everything that happens. And Húrin says, no, you're a liar. We know you're a liar. That's, the only consistent thing that we know about you is that you just can't be trusted. And so, we kick off the story of someone who's apparently, quote, cursed by powers beyond their control, with the kind of the originator or subject of that curse straight up saying there's no, you don't have any power to curse me or my family. We all have free will. And then seeing, I think that makes it very poignant, much more poignant than, oh, Hurin was wrong and Turin actually was cursed. It's much better if Morgoth says, well, look, you little punk, I don't even need to be able to curse you guys. You're all just so messed up anyway. Oh, well. Yeah. And speaking of curses and dooms and oaths and things like that, the founding of Nargothrond.
Yes.
This brings us nicely full circle. So Finrod and Turgon, both cousins and friends. That's another thing I think we didn't point out. We know that, Maedhros and Fingon go together as cousin friends. We have Arathel and Celegorm and Curufin kind of tagging along as cousin friends. Finrod and Turgon are mentioned to be pretty close friends, and Turgon was, much more in with the sons of Finarfin than he was with the sons of Feanor. And they go off one day kind of hunting before either of them has really settled down firmly. Turgon has his prophetic dream sent to him by Ulmo that he needs to go off and found a hidden city. Finrod has the same dream, and they don't talk to each other about the dream, so they each assume that it was something that was just sort of sent to them alone. But Finrod has basically the same dream, and he goes off and founds this underground city by the river Narog that his sort of granduncle? I'm trying to get this right. It's Olwë's brother Elwë, Elu, Thingol, so that would make him his granduncle. Tells him, if you're looking to build a city, there's a place over here that, would be pretty good. So he sets up Nargothrond there as his sort of version of the hidden elf city. So we have these two, they do sort of develop a little bit in parallel. The difference, of course, as you noted, is that Finrod gets involved very quickly in the whole story of the Silmaril, which is, I think, why Beren and Luthien, of the three, quote, great stories, is the worst candidate to make any sort of adaptation of. Well, as you said, the Fall of Nargothrond, it's pretty self-contained, You can make references to the war that's going on outside its walls, but you don't really need to understand the Silmaril or the Oaths or all of that to understand.
You mean. Yeah.
Did I say Nargothrond? I am so sorry. Gondolin. It has been a week, people. The Fall of Gondolin, quite self-contained. Children of Hurin, quite self-contained. Beren and Luthien is basically, this is the problem with making the Oath of Feanor. At least that's my opinion. I think this is really, I know it's, most people consider it to be this sort of heroic romance between Beren and Luthien, and he's immortal and she's an elf, and what are they gonna do? But for me, it's like at least half of the fun comes from this being an exploration of, oh, hello, kitty.
Yeah, sorry, they always make, I have three, they always make up.
Don't apologize, he's very cute.
People like that.
Yes. I have a giant dog, so he's a lot less cute if he jumps on my lap. There's a lot of mud and jowls and
all good. Sorry, don't keep looking.
Okay, keep continuing on. Beren and Luthien is, I know it starts as a romance and that's sort of the focus, but what it's, the more I read it, the more I'm like, this is just doom. This is doom all the way down. This is the fruit of the oath really coming into play. So Finrod founds Nargothrond. It's fairly prosperous. He has a good trade deal going with the dwarves. He's in a pretty well-located spot. His people are quite numerous, so he's built up a pretty good following. Things are going well for him. Of course, it's the Siege of Angband. Morgoth is pretty well contained behind the defensive wall that the Noldor have set up, so things are going pretty well for everyone. And
just one fun fact before you come to that topic you want to talk about, because I just want to let people know, because very often this people have been living in other places before, or races or whatever, and they've been, hunted down, or they've been, like the Rohirrim when they come to Rohan, the Dunlendings were there before, and all these topics, of people having to leave their home or losing their homes, which is a big topic in Tolkien. I don't know if many people know that the petty dwarves actually lived at the River Narog, and actually Nargothrond wasn't built at that time, but they lived there. And then the elves of Doriath, I assume, it's never really said, but I assume it's Thingol's elves, they hunted them down because they didn't know what is that, they didn't know the tiny tinier dwarves, the petty dwarves, because they look different from the OG dwarves. They're kind of the evil version, like the North version of dwarves, you get a feeling, with Mime coming in the Children of Hurin later on. And this is actually, Mime's family is from there, just a little short, but then they got kind of extinct, and there were almost no petty dwarfs in that region left because they were hunted down by the elves.
And Mime comes back, I think,
yes,
in one of the versions. I think it's the official version. Hurin actually finds him in the ruins of Nargothrond, which
I think something. Yeah.
And he's, basically says this stuff is all mine now. These are my ancestral lands. How dare you? And I think Hurin does not take kindly to that, as I recall, at all.
No.
Which you're right. The petty dwarves are kind of the more sinister version of the dwarves. They're smaller. They're kind of an odd people. The dwarves
they're
themselves,
like cutouts from the dwarves themselves in a way, and this is why they kind of maybe grew, small, like shorter, and all in stature and all that. Maybe that that just shows their them growing apart or whatever. But I just want, because I like this topic of people losing their homes and have to leave and all that, because actually you could feel very sorry for Mime, and you do a teeny tiny little bit till, he does all these, his son gets killed and all that. It's not every bad person in Tolkien is really just bad. There's a story behind it very often. And I kind of, they've been hunted down by elves. So yeah. Just wanted to add that, sorry.
No, for sure. I would say that more often than not, the villainous or bad characters in Tolkien do have a sympathetic backstory. People may, sometimes on a very superficial reading or a sort of pop culture understanding, it seems like all of his villains are just, well, they're bad because, like, a lot of them do objectively terrible things while having pitiable or even understandable sympathetic motivations. Like my babies, the Feanorians, which we will come to very shortly.
Oh my god, you're literally the worst stan of the Feanorians. Anyway, let's get back to Nargothrond.
Well, they're going to Nargothrond. So let's see. So a battle breaks out a little bit suddenly, actually quite suddenly, because it's called the Battle of the Sudden Flame. Morgoth is trying to break the siege, and he has some success in that. The elves are able to kind of stay his progress at one point, but he does break out of the lands where he was previously confined, and he does it with a lot of fire and a lot of volcanoes and a lot of at least one dragon.
Yeah,
presumably maybe some others are getting involved. Balrogs all over the place. However many Balrogs there ended up being, 3, 7, 2,000, however many Balrogs exist, they were all there.
Yeah, Tolkien is very vague. Like, he changes, like, even in Gondolin, there are 9, then there are 29. It's different.
I think there's 7 or 8 different. This is exactly how many Balrogs there were.
Yeah, but if it's called the Battle of the Sudden Flames, then you can't imagine there were a few of them.
No, there have to have been, again, as many Balrogs as there were probably there. Maximum Balrogs is what I'm trying to say.
Dracarys.
Very nice. Battle of the Sudden Flame. Finrod, of course, is marching to the aid of his cousins and siblings and all of that, and trying to help slow down and stop the Morgoth just running rampant over the north of Beleriand. And he has these men who are his allies. So, don't know, we can't get too into it, but men have come to Beleriand in the years intervening between the initial arrival of the Noldor and this battle. And Finrod is actually the first of the Noldor to meet with men, to see their value as allies, to befriend them, because men start out, at least the ones who make it here, they're in a very primitive state. They don't really understand a lot of the politics or what's happening. They just know that Morgoth bad, we don't like. We are trying to move away from him, but of course they've kind of stepped in it. They've landed in Beleriand, where he's actively waging war against the elves, and Finrod really takes an interest in them, and he befriends the one particular house, the House of Beor.
And
they swear fealty to him. That's, I think, what Beor means. It's not the man's original name, but he gets that name because of his allegiance to Finrod. So one of the members of this house, elves are very long lived, so Finrod has gone through several generations of Beorings at this point, and one of his, or the vassal that he's on at the time of the Battle of the Sudden Flame is Barahir. And Barahir helps him out of a tight spot. His forces come in and kind of save him, guard his back. And Finrod says, as he's retreating, he's like, "This was super cool. Thank you so much. Here's my ring." He gives him this ring from Valinor, I believe, that's two serpents intertwined, one upholding a crown of flowers, one devouring it. He says, "Here's this ring. This is a token of my debt to you, essentially."
Yeah. Well, what is super interesting about that, let me chime in here. Who has that ring literally in the third age, I really like the story of swords, of rings, of objects surviving all these downfalls, all these dooms, because they are very meaningful objects then if they survive. And that ring has seen so many owners basically, and it's so important. And the ring bearer later on is basically our Aragorn. It gets through the Númenórean hands and many other kings, and it's really, really cool that this ring survives till the third age, and so gets to Aragorn.
Yeah, it's even at least in the extended edition, they found a way to work it into the film, even a reference to it, which if you aren't really paying close attention to, you'll miss it. But this is the ring of Barahir, even though it was Finrod's, but he gives it to Barahir, and this is the big moment where Finrod says, "Look, I'm in your debt now. If you ever need anything, you show people this ring, and they'll know that bring you to me, and I'll help you."
Yeah.
So Barahir goes home and finds his homeland pretty much overrun by orcs and wolves and interlopers from distant lands and all kinds of not good times. So he and his young, at that point fairly young, I think, sort of teenager son Beren and a handful of companions decide that they're going to try and defend their land as best they can. All of the sort of women and children abandon Dorthonion, which is where they, they're sort of their realm that they had settled in. And Beren and his father Barahir fight this war of attrition against the Morgoth's invading forces that obviously it doesn't go well for them until they're down to just 12 men. And one of their party betrays them. It's a very sad story, but he's not a Noldo, so I'm not going to talk about him here. Sorry, Gorlim. Maybe next week.
But it wasn't his fault,
I know.
Like Sauron tricked him.
He did, yeah, and Gorlim. All right, I guess we're talking about Gorlim now. Let's do it.
Sorry,
he deserved better. Sauron deceives Gorlim. Gorlim has this beautiful wife, Eilionel, and he really misses her. He's worried about her. He hasn't seen her in forever, and he thinks he sees her one day. Crying in their old house. He's out walking and he sees their old house and he sort of has this vision of it all lit up and his wife crying in it that he has forsaken her and what is she going to do now? And he's just, appalled. Of course he would be. It's a trap. The orcs capture him. They bring him to Sauron. And Sauron says, well, they torture him and it's a lovely time. And he's, not going to tell them where his friends are because he's a good kid. And Sauron comes to him and says, well, don't you want to see your wife again? And Gorlim's like, well, of course I want to see her. Yes, please. Can I see my wife again? And Sauron says, well, I've released her. I've let her go. You can see her again. I'll take you to where she is. You just have to tell me where Barahir and his companions are. And Gorlim, of course, in pain and thinking that this is a way out, he wavers and he's, daunted by Sauron, who has this very great, force of terror and pressure that he exerts on people far more powerful than Gorlim with great success. So Gorlim spills. And of course, the sting in the promise of Sauron is that he had released Eilionel from life. And to join her, Gorlim would be killed, which he is.
Yeah.
His ghost, it's a very sad story. This is like, I know he has destroyed continents and murdered thousands of innocents, but this is one of my top 5 things that makes me mad at Sauron. Like, how could you do that to someone? It's very cold, and it takes a sort of there's this
Because it's
glee
the
in
one-on-one
twisting the
story. It's a
knife.
one-on-one story. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's my top what the fuck moment. What the F moment is, oh, sorry, is, when he, oh no, we can't talk, when he kills one of our characters we just talk about, which is so gruesome, like in the tower he even built. And yeah, it's horrible. I think the
Yeah.
one-on-one scenes, when you slaughter an army of whatever, you don't have this one-on-one confrontations, and you don't really feel for the one protagonist. That yeah.
Well, and you can
Anyway,
see if people are in a pitched battle,
yeah,
you're going to try to kill the maximum number of the other side as you can, and that just makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
But it's here we really see that Sauron goes out of his way to be cruel and to
yes,
give
malicious.
Gorlim.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gives Gorlim that moment of like, oh, I really messed up, and now it's going to be a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
Just for no other reason, just to watch him suffer and to give him extra pain.
Yeah.
So the good news is Gorlim's shade or spirit, if you will, escapes and goes to warn Baron, who's out on patrol, and be
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, you need to wake up and run back and find where your father is because I messed up and I told Sauron everything. Baron wakes up horrified, runs back to find their camp, and it's too late.
Yeah.
His father's been killed. The ring has actually been taken, but he hunts down the orcs who killed his father and his companions, and he kills them all and reclaims the ring, which is going to be very, very useful for him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fast forward a bit. So, deep breath. I always run out of air.
I know you're talking a lot and very fast, which is good because we can cover a lot then, Lexi. Well, we can go either now back to Nargothrond, and that's let's go to Doriath now, because I think that's the chronological order of the story. So Beren and Luthien, I mean, that's another thing, and we can cover that another time. But they meet in the woods, very similar to how Luthien's parents actually met. It really is basically the same. They met in the woods. He falls in love immediately. She falls in love with him. Fast forward, they want to be together. She's like, ooh. My dad is a king, of the elves. You're immortal, but okay, let's see what dad says. So they go there, and obviously the father and this is, I made a super funny Twitter poll: who's the best of the worst fathers in Middle Earth? And obviously Thingol is in there. But to redeem Thingol a teeny tiny little bit, I don't think it was just because he obviously rejected a mortal for the hand for his daughter. But I do think it's not just because he's a mortal. He shows his ring and he says, I'm not just anyone. I'm basically from this and this house, which kind of, the 3 OG houses of men. They're very important, just like the 3 OG houses of the elves. They're and he is basically from a royal line of men. But that doesn't mean anything to Thingol, really. He's not that involved as Finrod, for example, is with men, but he obviously recognizes that ring, which I find weird because he wasn't in Aman, but people know objects and faces and whatever. So the king of Doriath, Thingol, I think he didn't want to accept him because he wouldn't have accepted any, like, especially not a prince of the Noldor. He wouldn't have liked that one. Who else is there? I think nobody was good enough for his precious daughter, and you really have that feeling. They just had one child, and this is how fathers are. We have fathers. My father was definitely like, or is like that. And you kind of get it. It's not because he's a man, but I really like, I'm very big into fairy tales. I have a whole somewhere here a whole fairy tale thing, and I love fairy tales, and this is very fairy tale like, because then he kind of sends him to a quest which is basically no one can, like the quest now into the faith with the Silmarils, because he asks him to bring him a Silmaril, and for the hand of his daughter. And there's a really cool exchange. Again, this is too deep now, but there's a really cool exchange of Beren telling him, "Oh, you've got nothing else? Like, this is how elven kings now give away the hands of their daughters just for some jewels? Okay, good.
Yeah,
I'm going to
that's
get
all.
Yeah, I'm going to get it. And obviously knowing it's not that easy, but I really like this fairy tale aspect of this, quest. And you have that so often in fairy tales, like going on a quest and actually it's impossible. Like there's a really cool German story of getting 3 hairs from the devil, and then get the princess basically. And it's literally the same. And we know Tolkien loved fairy tales, and they're very different. There are also aspects of Luthien being in the tower with her hair and everything. It's so cool. And very often here you have the thing that it's not the prince doing everything, but it's actually the princess very often rescuing the prince basically from the tower in the end. And just together they are strong. And I like this message that it's not Beren going on the quest for the Silmaril, getting it, and being the hero and then marrying the princess. This is very emancipatory. Is that a word? I'm really bad.
Sounds like a word to me.
Yeah. So, this is very like strong females, and people often criticize Tolkien for there are no real strong females. Yes, there are. Luthien is one, and her mother, badass mother. She's one of them, and she doesn't just let him do it, and he often fails doing things alone. And when she chimes in, and they do things together, they're successful, and I really like that. And now comes into play what you were teasing before. This oath Finrod gave to Beren's father years and years ago, now comes into play because, he cashes in on that. Is that a thing? Yeah, he cashes in on that promise. And you have the feeling when Finrod leaves Nargothrond, he kind of knows he's going to his doom. I think, is it in a letter? It's somewhere Tolkien kind of states that, and I really like that. He's a magnificent elf. He's a king of the greatest kingdom, actually. It said that Nargothrond and the lands, because he had all the lands to the water, till the havens, till Círdan's people. So that was actually the greatest kingdom in Middle-earth at that time, even greater than Doriath. Just keep that in mind. Tolkien quotes that. Greater than Gondolin, greater than anything. And he leaves all that behind with his brother, and goes on a journey. He probably knows he won't return, but he still does it because he made that promise, and I really like that about him.
Yeah, I think even in the Silmarillion, there's a couple chapters before all this starts, there's this foreshadowing moment where his sister's kind of giving him a hard time and says, Finrod, okay, we're here now, and you have this great kingdom. What about some heirs? Have you given any thought to taking a wife? And Finrod says essentially, I have this feeling, because Finrod and Galadriel tend to be, with their Vanyar blood, they're very foresighted.
Yes.
They have a lot of premonitions, and Finrod says, I'm not taking a wife. One reason is because he's in love, of course, with Amaria, who's still in Valinor.
A Vanya, by the way, which is very rare. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's a person that Finrod picks out to be his beloved. So that in itself, I think, distinguishes her. She must have been a cut above the norm. Yeah. So he's carrying a torch for her, but they were never married, so potentially he could choose a different person. But he says to Galadriel, I have this feeling that I too will swear an oath, referencing the oath, the multiple oaths that have already transpired and will transpire. And he says, I'm going to swear an oath, and it's going to be the end of me, and nothing of my kingdom will survive that an heir could inherit. He says, so there's really no point in me messing around with the whole dating game and trying to beget heirs, because I have this strong feeling that I'm only here for a limited time and something's going to happen that's going to take me out of the picture. So when Beren shows up with the ring and it's like, hey, guess what? Do you want to like break into actual hell with me and try and steal one of the shiny rocks that kicked off this whole centuries long war? Finrod is like, oh, this is it. My time has come. The signs are clear.
Yeah.
But he brings Beren into Nargothrond. Beren actually has to, like, as he's approaching where he thinks Nargothrond is, he has to keep holding the ring up and being like, I'm Beren, son of Bear here, please don't shoot me. So the elves take him to Finrod because they recognize the ring, and Finrod welcomes him, gives him a big bear hug, and is like, of course, you know, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. This is not going to end well for us, but I will do everything I can to help you, because staying with him currently in Nargothrond with their sizable following are his cousins, his half-cousins. I'm sure they would both be very keen on that distinction. His half-cousins, Celegorm and Curufin, the middle sons of Feanor, who have retreated after the Battle of the Sudden Flame kind of wiped out most of their land and forced them to retreat. They retreat with Finrod, and they help fortify Nargothrond. And Celegorm's a great hunter, and Curufin's a great rider, and they go out and help to kind of defend the realm. They're very popular. People really like them, but they've got this little thing, this little matter, trivial affair of the oath that they swore, damning them to hell if they don't absolutely annihilate anyone, regardless of their reasons or their, you know, their status.
Yeah.
They will absolutely not stand for anyone holding a Silmaril for any other reason than them and their family. That's the oath. They took it. They swore it. Whether they regret it, open question. Probably not these two, though.
No, these two, no. No.
The least popular Feanorians, for good reason. Yeah. And these are...
at least they make a good story, you know? Like, the taking over Nargothrond is really cool and makes you question, like, who are these elves? Like, they're not... Why don't they follow their king?
No, it's... this is where it's amazing because, again, like I said, that you can't tell the story of Beren and Luthien and really appreciate it or understand it without appreciating the severity of the doom of the Noldor that they all are ensnared in by virtue of either participating in the kinslaying of Alqualondë, or at least, you know, not objecting to it or not repenting of it, like, for example, Finarfin does. So Finrod, even though he's innocent of that particular act, is still tied into this doom where nothing you do, nothing you start is going to end the way you want it to. So the Feanorians hear that, you know, Finrod comes before his people and he says, look, you know, this is Beren. Remember his dad when he saved us all a few years ago and, you know, lost everything in the process? Beren's here to ask us for a favor. We need to help him on this quest to get back the Silmaril. Silmaril is the Feanorian trigger word. So Celegorm and Curufin stride forth, and I love this, and I think it's in the lay they really kind of get more distinct personalities. Yeah. Celegorm kind of fires everyone up, and then Curufin comes in from behind and gives the slow, sort of plausible, calm, reasoned support to whatever Celegorm's been spewing.
And that the power of speech, like I was talking about that in the last stream, again, like they must have inherited that from their father, because it takes a lot, you know, to convince a kingdom not to follow their king, except like 12 or how many, or 11, I don't remember how many were. It takes a lot. So this is, again, the power of speech.
Yeah, they must have inherited something, because they make the people of Nargothrond so afraid of the consequences. Yeah. You know, they basically invoke the terror of war and kin strife and civil war and bloodshed, and they do such a good job freaking out the populace of Nargothrond, which, you know, these are elves. They're primarily Noldor. They've seen several battles. They're not wimps necessarily, but they're so thoroughly freaked out that none of them march again to open war until, of course, Turin comes in later. And when they march to open war under Turin's advice, it ends terribly for them. So Celegorm and Curufin have freaked the people of Nargothrond out so badly that they will not obey their king and they will not help Beren. They're like, no, we should wash our hands of this guy. We should kick him to the curb. Finrod says, we're not going to, you know, Finrod's a bit salty. He says, really, you guys, really? So he throws his crown on the ground and he says, well, fine, you know, if no one's going to listen to me, then obviously I'm not your king, so why should I bother pretending? I think it's 10 elves that set out with Finrod and Beren for a total of 12, but the chief among them...
Yeah, I think I remember the number 12, but that would make sense. Then it's 10. Well, it doesn't make it better,
No, it really doesn't. But it's like, it's that dozen thing. I think it's, Baron's down to him and 11 companions, so there's a dozen, and then it's a dozen who sets forth from Nargothrond, and the chief of them, Edrihil, comes and he picks up the crown off the ground, and he returns it to Finrod, and he says, it doesn't matter, your people aren't listening to you, that's on them. You still have the rightful authority of king here.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna march forth, then you should appoint a steward. Don't just throw this on the ground, because then the Sons of Feanor are gonna pick it right up. So Finrod relents a little bit and assigns his brother in some versions, I think nephew in others, Orodreth.
I would go with brother, because that makes the Finduilas and Gil-galad story plausible. Because Gil-galad was a son, right?
Again, I think in the Silmarillion, Gil-galad is Fingon's son. In Peoples of Middle-earth, he's Orodreth's son, and Orodreth is a son of Angrod? I want to say, because Agnor would have been involved.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Agnor caught feels for a mortal woman, so he wouldn't have any descendants. So
I just like the Finduilas and Gil-galad being brother and sister. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think they're both siblings, both descendants of Orodreth in the late version. So let's go with that one. So Orodreth, related junior relative, let's say, of Finrod, because we don't know what version our listeners might be subscribing to. But Orodreth takes up the crown and he says, I'll be king in your stead. And, Celegorm and Curufin are smiling up their sleeves here, like, yeah, right, you're going to call yourself the king, but we all know who clearly has the real power here.
Yeah.
So Finrod goes off with Beren and a measly 10 companions, and they disguise themselves as orcs and actually manage to sneak into Tol Sirion, what was formerly Tol Sirion, now Tol Ingaurhoth, the island of werewolves.
Such a cool name, Tol Ingaurhoth. I like it.
It's very spooky.
If I ever have a house somewhere and mention somewhere in the countryside, that's the name for it.
Tower of Werewolves, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically Thoringuitil, so I'm the only vampire in that story. Anyway, keep. Sorry.
No, please interrupt.
I was born in Transylvania, so I'm the vampire here.
I'm quite jealous. It's pretty cool. Although Tolkien's vampires they seem to have like bat wings in all of their forms and long iron claws and shrieking voices, but the power of flight. So that's.
Have you seen me after dark, Lexi?
That is a good point. I have not. I should not make assumptions.
Anyway,
they do. I'm putting it off because this next bit is one of the most painful bits in all of Tolkien for me.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
So poor Finrod has managed to disguise all of his people as orcs, and they've managed to sneak all the way into Tol Ingaurhoth, which is an island fortress that Finrod actually originally built.
Built it, yes.
That Sauron took over.
Mm-hmm.
Sauron going by many names at this point, not quite Sauron yet. Probably Gorthar would be the name that he was most...
Yes, yeah.
The cruel, the abhorred, not good names for Sauron. It's all usually something like a guy who will mess you up. So they actually make it all the way into the fortress, and Sauron kind of calls them out, and he's like, I don't recall sending a patrol out where you guys said you were. Your information, your intelligence doesn't match with what I have here in my reports.
Mm-hmm.
He looks like he knows.
That scene in Star Wars, when they disguised the ship with an old code, but they knew something was off, but they didn't know what.
Yeah, he knows that clearly something's awry here, but he's not exactly sure what. But he knows that this isn't kosher, so he's kind of questioning them. He's kind of toying with them, and it comes down to he starts to chant a song that's going to dispel the enchantment that Finrod has put on them to disguise them as orcs. To actually, like, make them look like orcs, as far as I can tell. Like, it's not just, you know, a really good makeup job. It's an actual image that's being projected over them. And Sauron starts to dispel that image. Finrod's like, well, this isn't going to work. So he starts to resist. He sings an answering song, and they go backward and forward, and they have this mighty, what my spouse insists on calling the epic rap battle between Finrod and Sauron, where they're both trying to chant this magically infused song. And, you know, song is what formed the universe in Tolkien's mythology. So it's very important. Finally, Sauron invokes the kinslaying and, you know, brings up the memories of all of that. And he's basically makes the point like, wow, you know, yeah, you guys are so noble and loyal and great. What about that time where you all killed each other? And Finrod breaks at that point and he falls before the throne. And Sauron throws them all in the dungeon and says, you know, okay, so I can see that you're 11 elves and a man. Who are you? And what are you doing? And none of them will tell. And he says, okay, so here's the deal. I will send a werewolf down to eat one of you one at a time. Until someone tells me what's going on here. You know, just hang you out here and the wolf can pick which one he likes. And so they endure that. All 10 of their companions get eaten until, of course, because this is a fairy tale and because I think Sauron knows that these are the two most important, so he's saving them. Until it's just Beren and Finrod dangling there. And Sauron is like, well, the man's not as important. Clearly, this other one's some sort of Noldoran prince, so he's the one I've got to preserve. He's the one with the information I can torture out of him later. He sends a wolf now to eat Beren, and Finrod is so not okay with this that he actually breaks the chains from off the wall, jumps on the werewolf, and kills him with his bare hands, and receives a mortal wound in the process. And this is also on my top 5 list of why I'm upset with Sauron, because he has a werewolf eat Finrod, and that's just not okay.
Yeah, and I like this, although, you know, it's not similar, the death, but I think it's important that its name, Finrod, was in a way a builder. He built many things, right? He left his mark on the world. Yes, this one was taken over by evil, but just like Tuorion, oh my god, the dude from Gondolin, Turgon. Sorry, all these names. Just like Turgon, who died with his tower collapsing in his city he built. Also, his cousin dies in the tower he built, you know, which is very reminiscent and sad. Makes it even sadder, you know.
It's that extra little, you know, and this was the very tower that you built thinking that it was going to keep you and your people safe, and is probably, you know, some sort of symbol of your kingship and your ownership, and here you are dying in the catacombs of that in a pretty dreadful way, it seems like. It's Tolkien, the Silmarillion is not G or even PG. It's like hard PG-13 to R. People get eaten alive and ravished, and it's not a good time.
Nope.
So and Beren kind of sags in his chains and is, you know, basically catatonic with grief at this point, and he's in despair, because what else is there? He's just gonna wait for the wolf to come eat him now. You know, his best friend has given his life to save him, but it didn't really do any good. Meanwhile, our action Princess Luthien has escaped from Menegroth, where her father Thingol was kind of holding her, actually in a tree. Because he was I think this is, we can see the conflicting desires of Thingol here, because he knows that if he traps her inside underground without air, without light, she's not going to thrive. So he makes sure that when he imprisons her, he does it in a nice tree so that she'll at least, you know, feel good about it, which it's like, you can see that he cares about her and he wants her to be happy, but it's like, really, Thingol? Like, you're setting a guard around her and preventing her from climbing down from a tree. At what point did you think, and she's, you know, she's definitely an adult at this point. She's was born centuries ago. She is not a child.
No.
At what point did you think this was good parenting? But again, but you can see that he cares. He's really, really protective. So Luthien has broken out, and she's actually come to Nargothrond, or near to Nargothrond, where she is intercepted by the Sons of Feanor, who look upon her and have a quiet, whispered conversation of, "Bro, she's hot. Yeah, I know she's really hot. She wants our Silmaril. I know she does. That's not cool. What if we marry her?
Yeah.
Instead of this like weird crusty human that showed up. What if we marry her and we can be kings of Nargothrond and have an inroad now into Doriath and have this additional sort of claim on Thingol's aid, and basically, so they sweet talk Luthien and they say, "Oh yeah, sure, this sounds terrible. You want to come take a break in our awesome city that we just usurped?" And they take her back and say, "Okay, cool. Now that you're here, let's not let you leave, and we're going to start writing some very pointed letters to your father, like, hey, your daughter's here. She's super hot. How do you feel about that?" All of this.
Plus, we're princes of the Noldor. Do you love us?
And of like the worst, Thingol would allow the Sons of Finarfin to come and go in his realm because they were related, because they were innocent of the kinslaying.
Although he gave them a scolding, a really good one.
He did, and he kind of put them in timeout for a while. But he did, he said,
"Yes,
you guys are cool."
They explained to him what happened, and then he understood and was okay. Oh,
well, he said, "I'm gonna need a few years to calm down." But but he did calm down, and so he's fairly closely allied with the Sons of Finarfin, and the daughter, of course, is
and Galadriel. Yes,
staying probably mostly in Doriath with Melian and learning a lot from her.
Yeah, she was kind of like the adopted daughter, and you have very often, I have the feeling, Galadriel and Melian actually have the real mother-daughter relationship that Luthien and Melian never got in the story, at least, which is kind of sad. Luthien is always like more connected to Thingol, and the Melian Galadriel thing is the mother-daughter, like teachings and all that, which is weird. But anyway, sorry, that's another story.
Yeah, I think, and when we see Melian and Luthien interacting, it's in the context of Beren, the quest of the Silmaril and Beren arriving and that whole thing. And I think Melian knows too much about that to be a very sympathetic figure. Yeah. She knows that this is going to be important. She's afraid to really interfere with it. So Luthien, I think, does come to her at certain points and be like, "Mom, help. Like, what do I do?" And Melian's like, you kind of just got to decide what you're going to do about that. I can give you some information.
Yeah, I get that. But the teachings, like she teaches Galadriel all these things. She must have taught Luthien, because later on Luthien uses this now in the story where we're coming to. So, she must have taught her.
Yeah, I think they reference a couple times that Melian's using some of the arts or Luthien's using some of the arts that Melian would have taught her, or she would have inherited from Melian, who's a Maia. So Luthien, of course, is not just an elf princess. She's half elf, half angelic spiritual being. Yeah. So already like very, very overpowered. But trapped now in Nargothrond. And she's saved by Celegorm's dog, who loves her.
Oh, Huan.
Huan
is puppy in the world.
Huan, best boy, 10 out of 10, would pet.
Yeah.
Just, yes, I have a big beef bone that I would give to Huan if he were here. Yeah. And he's this enormous like wolfhound, and he just kills everything, and he's Celegorm's best friend. They've been together since he was a puppy, and he's bred by Orome, and who's a Valar, like who's a god, and this god gave Celegorm this puppy, basically, is like, this is going to be your dog forever, man, and you guys are going to have so many great adventures. And now Huan's like, man, I didn't think kidnapping a cute girl and doing all this stuff, like, and now we're going to force her to marry us, like, that's not cool. This is not what I signed on for. This is not a great adventure. No. So he makes this decision to help Luthien out, get her to where she needs to be. He lets her ride him, which I think at one point is, like Tolkien says, this is kind of a blow to his ego, but he makes the sacrifice.
It's so cute that he mentions that. I was reading it and I was like, oh.
Yeah, but it's like, what's the big deal? I mean, I've
Yeah.
known dogs who would quite happily let people ride them if
Yeah.
they were big enough, but Huon apparently thinks this is a bit beneath his dignity, but he's like, well, all right, if it's Luthien and if it's necessary to save Baron and Finrod, who I
The thing
like,
is,
then
he's probably a Maiar spirit, just in another form. This is how I would interpret Huan. Just the form is different, right? He was Orome's companion in a way, not brother because he wasn't on that level of a Valar, but he was. I would say he was a Maiar, just in another. And why would he have somebody on his riding on his back? That would just be my
no,
interpretation.
I think that's attested. We know that Huon's not just an ordinary dog. He's sentient. He can speak
Yeah.
at least 3 times before
And
his death
yeah.
is his sort of doom. He's immortal. He's been given, all these prophecies about him. He's the Lord of Dogs, basically. So yeah, he's special, and we know that Sauron and Morgoth are said to have put evil spirits into the form of wolves to make
Yes.
wargs. Probably
Yeah.
something parallel on a more benign level is what produced Huon.
Although I think Huan has his own, like the eagles, it's questionable, because people say the eagles are Maiar spirits. I don't think so. I think in a way the eagles work for the Valar and for Maiar, but I don't think they have that much of a free will. I think Huan, and you see it in the story, has more of a free will. So this is why I think he's one above the great eagles, for example.
Yeah, he
How about
definitely
you?
makes choices, and this is something that,
Yes. He doesn't just
yeah,
get a job. Nobody gave him a job. He's just doing this out of his own intuition and free will.
yeah, he's chosen thus far to
Yes.
be a companion of Celegorm, and he chooses at some
Yes.
point to not do that when he sees that Celegorm is
Yeah.
making really poor life choices.
Yeah.
So he sides with Luthien, and they go to Tolin Garhoth, the island
Yeah.
of werewolves. Not any more welcoming than it was when we first mentioned it. Luthien starts to sing a song in challenge that's kind of causing
Yeah.
this little earthquake. Baron hears her and he's like, "That's my girlfriend. I must be dreaming," and sings a song in answer. And so she hears that and he's like, "Oh, good, he is in there."
Yeah.
So Luthien's working on all that. Wolves, of course, start pouring out of the werewolf fortress,
Yeah.
and Huon dispatches them all neatly
This
one by
is
one.
so cool. I want to see that in film. Seriously.
I know it. Like, Sauron is sending the wolves like down the bridge across the river because
Yeah.
it's this island fortress in the middle of the
Yeah.
river,
Yeah.
and he's sending the wolves one by one, and Huon is just silently just taking them out before they can reach Luthien, who's
Yeah.
like curled up on this little rock, and she's trying to
Yeah.
basically strive with Sauron the same way that Finrod did and failed.
Yeah.
And finally, Sauron realizes Dragluin, one of his boss wolves, comes back mortally wounded and says, "This isn't working. Huon is there, and we all know that Huon just nukes wolves. That's what he was made to do."
Yeah.
He's a one shot, one kill kind of guy. So Sauron decides, he's heard the rumors and the prophecies about Huon, and he says, there's this prophecy that he can only be defeated by the greatest wolf ever. Well, I'm a shapeshifter. I'll just become the greatest wolf ever. So he does that, and he comes forward in wolf form, all shaggy and hairy and gross and dripping venom, and it's not a good deal. And Huon fights him, and luckily, because Luthien is there also working some sleep magic,
Yeah.
Huon gets the upper hand and has him pinned down, and Sauron kind of polymorphs for a few minutes, and then he said, finally they really pin him down, and
Yeah.
Luthien says, okay, here's how this is going to work. My dog here is going to rip your throat out and you're going to die, and your spirit is going to go back to Morgoth with no body, and he's just going to laugh at you forever, and be
You
very
won't be
upset
his
with you.
second in command anymore after this.
Well, no, yeah, you're going to be the butt of his jokes and the object of his scorn and the, subject of the direst punishments he can devise. Or you tell me how to get into that island, I let you go, and then you can kind of be on your own terms, decide how you're going to spin this, essentially. Because either way, this is a huge embarrassment for Sauron. He's been beaten by a puppy and a girl. Not a puppy. Huon's a very big boy. He's a very...
Again, I mean, Huan probably a Maiar, Luthien a half Maiar, so,
No, I underplay them there, but it's still, he's Sauron. He's the greatest of the Maiar. He's flush with power from Morgoth. He's got
Yeah,
all of
but
these.
at that time, he didn't have the ring. He didn't pour all his energy. He didn't have the great plan in mind. If you're just the second in command and not the one in command, you think different and yeah, whatever. But yeah.
And Sauron is wasted on hand-to-hand combat anyway.
Yeah.
We know that he's at his best when he can scheme. He's
Yeah.
not he's a plotter, not a fighter.
No.
So yeah. Sauron, of course, being like ever so brave and courageous, says, "Fine, I'll give you whatever you need. Just let me go." So they do, and he goes and he, it's vampire form, as you said. There are vampires in Tolkien, probably a little bit different from the Twilight version, but very creepy.
Sparkly, probably.
Sauron would have been a sparkly vampire.
Oh.
Horrible, like bat form and fangs and everything, but he'd have put the sparkle on there.
Mm-hmm.
Sparkly or not, he flies off. And Beren and Luthien Luthien and Huan go and rescue Beren, so then they are Beren, Luthien, and Huan. And they're kind of regrouping, Beren's regaining his strength, and they're arguing about what they're going to do next, because Beren says, well, we've defeated Sauron, we learned some intel, now we have to go on to Angband. Try and reclaim these Silmarils, because I'm not just going to let you live out here as an outlaw with me. You deserve safety and a home, and that's, what your father made me promise to do, so that's what I'm going to try and do. And Luthien's like, this is really dumb. But they haven't made up their minds one way or another. And who should show up but the Sons of Fëanor again, who have been kicked out of Nargothrond because everyone realized that they were terrible people.
Yeah, finally.
And they said news arrives of Finrod's death, and
yes.
The death of everyone, and they're the people of Nargothrond are they're ashamed, as well they should be, and appalled, and they're like, how could we have let this happen? You guys knew this would happen. You talked us into selling our king to the werewolf guy who ate him, or caused him to be eaten, I suppose. It's horrifying stuff. So they kick Celegorm and Curufin out. They say, you guys are gone. This is where they have a schism. Interestingly, Curufin has the son Celebrimbor, who will be important later, and they say that Celebrimbor remains behind because he says to his dad, yeah, that was messed up. I'm not going to be involved with this anymore. Celebrimbor, I don't think swore the oath. He's tangled in it just like all the rest of them are, but he didn't actually swear it himself.
Yeah.
So, very humiliated, the Fëanorians are out riding, and they encounter Beren and Luthien, and they decide to try and kill Beren and possibly re-abduct Luthien. And Huan, being the good boy that he is, stands between them and doesn't let them do this, which is really the final moment. Because Huan, after they rescue Beren, Huan actually returns to Celegorm, and he's like, okay, I didn't approve of that thing with the girl, but that's over now. We can be good now. And then they find the girl again, and Celegorm's up to his same old tricks, and Huan's like, this can't go on. So Beren actually knocks Curufin off his horse, which I think is so amazing. He just takes a flying leap and knocks him down and gets him on the ground.
They're just 3, 4, 5 humans. You have the feeling, and Tuor is one of them. Turin is definitely one of them, and Beren as well. That can definitely withstand, and Hurin, with his battle axe on the field, slaying thousands of orcs. That can actually, be compared to the power of an elf, of a warrior elf, and an Noldorian prince.
Yeah, he gets, we know Curufin's a great writer. He's known for having a lot of kills to his name in terms of at least the wolves and orcs that were harassing Nargothrond. Beren gets him on the ground and has him in a chokehold and is pretty much about to kill him when Luthien intervenes and says, we're better than these guys.
Yeah.
We don't need to kill other elves to basically to do what we need to do. So Celegorm there... of course, loyal to his brother, because if nothing else, Fëanorians are loyal to other Fëanorians. They basically have Curufin hostage, and they say, okay, here's the deal. We're going to let you up. You give us all your stuff. Leave us one of your horses, leave us your armor, and we'll let you up, and you guys can go. And so, of course, Celegorm's constrained, and he's got Huan there barking at him and keeping his horses from approaching. Yeah. Celegorm is not riding dogs. That would be beneath his dignity as well. They let Curufin go. They, exchange. They take his armor. They take his clothes. They take his horse. The Feanorians shout some nasty words at them and ride off. And as they're riding off, Curufin actually turns around and fires off one last arrow at them, which hits Beren in the shoulder.
Yeah.
So very, very poor form. Very treacherous. And this is something that men remember in particular later when the Noldor are trying to rally everyone to unite and to oppose Morgoth again. And men remember that, you guys just shoot people. Like, men, elves, it doesn't matter to you. You just shoot whoever gets in your way. You don't care. You have no conscience. So this really comes back to haunt them.
Yeah. That you can't trust them. Yeah.
That's the oath for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, let's fast forward because I don't think we should. Do you really want to tell the whole Beren and Luthien story? That's nothing. That's like not the Noldor, because the Noldor.
No. What you need to know, I think, at this point is that they get the Silmaril back and they give it to Thingol.
Yeah.
And they go, they have lots of other adventures, but we're not going to get into that. This is the end of their involvement with the Noldor.
Yeah.
And the beginning of Doriath's involvement with the Noldor, because after they claim the Silmaril and they bring it back and they give it to Thingol, they leave. Beren and Luthien themselves go off and kind of make their own little peaceful, idyllic country.
Their son then gets involved into it, but they themselves kind of not. I think, but Luthien has the Silmaril on that little island they live on. I think she has it, and just after her death, it goes back to Thingol, I think. Or
it trades hands because they have Thingol has it, and then the dwarves.
Yeah.
And then the sack, and then Beren reclaims it from the dwarves, and then it goes to Luthien, and then Dior goes because Thingol is dead, and it's a whole mess. So
which
I guess
shows the Silmaril is in action.
Yeah, the Silmaril is. There's something not right about those things, man. I don't know. I don't care how many times we say that. Oh, but Varda hallowed them, and they're like full of the light of the trees.
Just like the ring. No, just like the ring. It's no.
Yeah, there's the way that they act, at least in the story, and again, it's kind of like the is Turin actually cursed kind of thing. Are the Silmarils actually? Do they have some sort of agency, or is it just everyone, kind of loses their mind when they're around and becomes filled with greed? It's difficult to say, but to me, they're very sinister objects. When they appear, things go bad.
Yeah, when something is that pure and that beautiful, something is not right,
Yeah, it's a little uncanny to kind of give off that vibe. So while Beren and Luthien, after they have left Celegorm and Curufin, while they're approaching Angband to successfully get their Silmaril, they spot marks of a battle that happened previously in the aftermath of the Dagor Bragollach.
Yes.
And this would be one of the reasons why the Noldoran succession is in such doubt at the point that the quest for the Silmaril takes place, because, of course, when we left off in the last one, Fingolfin was High King of the Noldor in Arda.
Yeah.
Finarfin is in Aman, and Fingolfin is in Arda. And he does this. He suffers this massive defeat in the Battle of the Sudden Flame. It's did not go the way he thought it would at all. I believe this is where he loses one of his sons, Argon. Argon the Noble, I call him, because Argon is the name of a noble gas.
Yes, Argon does that. Yeah.
This is so
fourth child of Fingolfin, Aredel's younger brother, I think.
The only thing we really know about him, I think, is that he dies in this battle.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure he was an interesting person in his own right, but the important thing is, Fingolfin, he's seen his son die, he's seen some of his nephews die in this battle. He's seen, to him, what it seems like is that there's no way that the Noldor can come back from this. They were holding, they hadn't gained any ground in a long time, now they've just lost a bunch when they were supposedly at the height of his powers. So he does something, actually, I think Feanor would be very proud of him in this moment. I think he would. very much appreciate Fingolfin's rashness, because he decides he's going to take matters into his own hands, and we decided that this scene is just too good for us to describe to you. You probably need to hear it as it is written.
Yes, and excuse because I'm not the best reader, because this language is first of all a foreign language to me. It's English is actually my third language. French is my second one. So everyone chill out if I'm mispronouncing stuff.
You at least can roll your R's.
Yeah, well, that's the German in me.
Yeah,
Tolkien would have been proud. Actually, Tolkien's family is from. I mean, I'm from the south of Germany, but Tolkien's family is where I live now. Tolkien's original family, his father's side, I think, is actually from this area. I think they 15 kilometers away. That's I don't know, 30 miles or something, which is really cool. And Tolkien actually apparently is rooted in Tolkien, which means something like being courageous in a very difficult and dangerous situation, which is so cool.
Yeah, historically, he did not think that name described him particularly well, but he did.
No,
he did
not him, but his story. The characters of his story.
Very true.
Yeah. So, yes, what we're reading is now Fingolfin being very mad at the outcome of losing a lot of his people fighting Morgoth. And what I want to point out here is, we've been talking about Feanor a lot, and Feanor came to Middle-earth wanting to revenge his father, which, okay, as I said, 10% maybe of his intention was that, but to reclaim the Silmarils and definitely to kill Morgoth, to come after Morgoth. But he actually died pretty early on in the story. And who gets to fight? Who gets the boss fight with Morgoth? Not Feanor. He never reaches him, right? It's Fingolfin. And that tells you kind of everything about his importance in the story. Yes, I mean, spoiler, he dies. But it's a very cool death. And how Tolkien describes it is one of the most epic scenes. And I will read it in a second and shut up. But it is really, really important to this story that Tolkien gives this. He gives him a wound, which is, yes, not mortal because he's an immortal being, but that a regular elf being born in a man, yes, being a prince of the Noldor, but a regular elf, can wound this apparently next to Manwë, most important Valar, so next to God, one of the beings in this world with the most power, that he can do that actually just shows you how powerful he was and how strong his wrath. I think this is a lot about the wrath that is in him of losing so many people, of losing part of his family, for losing his sons and his daughter and all that, and this all culminates in this scene, which is really, really cool. Although I don't know, the fall of Gondolin is later on, but still, it will happen. Yes. So, no news came to Hithlum that Dorthonion was lost and the sons of Finarfin overthrown, and that the sons of Fëanor were driven from their lands. Then Fingolfin beheld, as it seemed to him, the utter ruin of the Noldor, and the defeat beyond redress of all their houses, and filled with wrath and despair, he mounted upon Rochalohar, his great horse, and rode forth alone, and none might restrain him. He passed over Dornu Fauglith like a wind amongst the dust, and all that beheld his onset fled in amaze, thinking that Orome himself was come. For a great madness of rage was upon him, so that his eyes shone like the eyes of the Valar. Thus he came alone to Angban's gates, and he sounded his horn, and smote once more upon the brazen doors, and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat. And Morgoth came. That was the last time in those wars that he passed the doors of his stronghold, and it is said that he took not the challenge willingly, for though his might was greatest of all things in the world, alone of the Valar he knew fear. But he could not now deny the challenge before the face of his captains, for the rocks rang with the shrill music of Fingolfin's horn, and his voice came keen and clear down into the depths of Angband, and Fingolfin named Morgoth Craven and Lord of Slaves. Oh my god, this is so cool. Therefore Morgoth came, climbing slowly from his whatever throne, and the rumor of his feet was like thunder underground. And he issued forth, clad in black armor, and he stood before the king like a tower, iron crowned, and his vast shield, sable unblazoned, cast a shadow over him like a storm cloud. But Fingolfin gleamed beneath it as a star, for his mail was overlaid with silver, and his blue shield was set with crystals, and he drew his sword Ringil, that glittered like ice. Then Morgoth hurled aloft Grond, the hammer of the underworld, which is literally one of the coolest names ever, and swung it down like a bolt of thunder. But Fingolfin sprang aside, and Grond rent a mighty pit in the earth, whence smoke and fire darted. Many times Morgoth essayed to smite him, and each time Fingolfin leaped away, as a lightning shot from under a dark cloud. And he wounded Morgoth with 7 wounds, and 7 times Morgoth gave a cry of anguish. Whereat the host of Angband fell upon their faces in dismay, and the cries echoed in the Northlands. But at last the king grew weary, and Morgoth bore down his shield upon him. Thrice he was crushed to his knees, and thrice arose again, and bore his broken shield and stricken helm. But the earth was all rent and pitted among him, and he stumbled and fell backward before the feet of Morgoth. And Morgoth set his left foot upon his neck, and the weight of it was like a fallen hill. Yet with his last and desperate stroke Fingolfin hewed the foot with Ringil, and the blood gushed forth black and smoking and filled the pits of Grond. Thus died Fingolfin, High King of the Noldor, most proud and valiant of the elven kings of old.
It's one of the best passages in the whole book.
Yeah, and it's just a small passage, and it's literally just this small passage. But oh my god, this is so good. And I always say, that he's not my favorite writer. I studied literature, and Tolkien is not my favorite writer, but some of these writings are just... I don't like all the description thingies. Like, I don't need a hobbit hole to be described on 35 pages. No, thank you. But that's just me, everybody can think what they want. But these scenes, the power of the words in just a few sentences, it's like, oh my gosh, it's literally so good.
Yeah, it's... and I mean that... Again, style is a different question. He does take this very remote style in the Silmarillion. Yeah. Of course, we're getting second and third hand, even more so. It's been edited, and
yes.
But yeah, the moments are just they're there. There's something very compelling about this.
Yeah, one other epic scene is the scene in the Battle of the Unnumbered Tears. I think all the battles are really well described and the words are epic. Yeah. When Azagal dies, the Lord of the Dwarves, the King of the Dwarves of Belegost, that's also that scene. The dwarves fighting with their iron mask, fighting Glaurung, and then the king dying. And the dwarves then mourning their king and carrying him away. That's also one of the best scenes in the Silmarillion. Is it in the Silmarillion or is it in?
No, it's
Tales. I'm not sure.
I think it's probably described in more detail in other places, but it's definitely in there because I remember being, quite young and reading it and being like, that's a good moment where the battle basically... I like dwarves. Yeah, I know. Well, Azaghal, is my favorite dwarf, and that moment where the battle basically kind of pauses because Azaghal is killed, and they, the dwarves just say, okay, that's it, we're done, and they carry him out of the battle, and everyone's just like, bro, like even the orcs, even the orcs kind of back off and are like, all right, take him. I'm not going to argue with you. You guys are scary. You guys chop dragons up. It's terrible.
Yeah, so these
Okay.
two scenes are some of my favorite scenes. But this shows you the importance. What he wounded him. He wounded, like it is said, he's so powerful, but he managed to wound him.
Well,
And
he wounds him, and it's a permanent wound. That's the other side of the coin to him being an immortal being, and arguably, you can't defeat him, but he's weakened to this point now where Fingolfin, who, as you said, he's just an elf, among the mightiest of elves, but still of a whole order of magnitude lower than anything that should be able to challenge Morgoth.
Yeah.
He wounds him so that he has a permanent limp.
Yeah.
And and actually, like, afterward, Morgoth goes to grab his body and basically crush it up and crush it in his hands and throw it to his wolves and defile it and do all kinds of things because, of course, Morgoth, petty and spiteful, and he's not just going to let this go with killing him. He's got to embarrass him as well. And Thorondor the Eagle swoops down and strikes him in the face and reclaims the body and flies it back to Gondolin.
Yeah.
Where Torgon builds him a lovely little cairn, which is, I think, a nice... It all, kind of ties back in together.
Yeah. It's sad, it's his father, and and you really what do you feel, because we were talking about two of the main characters now, like obviously Finrod, Turgon and Fingolfin. Do you feel the line, because Turgon is from the line of Fingolfin and Finrod is from his brother's line, do you feel, because literally everybody in the line of Fingolfin dies, do you think because he partook in the, I mean, not really in the Kingslaying, but he went, at least let's say he went to Middle-earth, he didn't go back, he didn't, like his brother, plead for mercy from the Valar and retreated and went back to Aman? No, he went to Middle-earth. Do you feel... Is there anything his line... It didn't die out, in Turgon's daughter, Idril, she lived on. Earendil, becomes very important. But his first line sons and daughters died out. Is there anything to that? Is that...
So I have thoughts on the Doom of the Noldor, and it really does kind of tie back a little bit to what we started out talking about with Turin and curses and prophecies and fates versus free will and your own choices and the consequences of those choices. And one of the things that we know about the children of Eru is that they can't the Valar are not supposed to interfere with them. They can't interfere with their free will, and they can't change
the fate.
They can't change what the outcome of what the children decide to do, of what elves and men and presumably dwarves decide to do. Mm-hmm. So there's this big climactic moment when the Noldor are about to leave Aman, and they've already killed a bunch of Teleri, and that's not cool. And Mandos appears before them, and he says, if you go any farther, it's, you will shed tears without number. Your bodies may be slain, and they will be slain. You will suffer immeasurably. Nothing you do is going to go the way you think it is. And a lot of people, and even in the book a little bit, it seems to be interpreted as this is a curse. This is like a punishment.
Yeah.
Whereas I see it very much as a warning. We, the Valar, we know how this is going to end for you. We know what, the themes that are woven into the music. We know how things tend to go. We can see that if you continue on this course that you're on, you're going to end up basically shooting yourselves in the foot for centuries, and it's going to be horrible. But we can't stop you, basically. So, turn back now, make a different decision. Don't throw your lot in with Feanor and his sons, who have kind of lost their minds and doomed themselves. And of course, most of the Noldor do. Fingolfin does. His sons all do. His daughter does. The children of Finarfin all follow suit. Most of their people do. And I think, and we know that, like, Galadriel, for example, one of the children of Finarfin, probably innocent of the kinslaying, or at least mostly innocent of the actual deed of shedding blood, had her own kind of reasons and motivations for wanting to go to Middle-earth, still falls under this, and is, you might say, well, what did she actually personally herself do that she's still dealing with the consequences of? Well, she chose to follow Feanor. She said, you know, I understand that this is what you're saying, and I'm throwing my lot in with these people. I'm going to choose vengeance and arrogance, honestly, over repentance and reflection. And I think that is what dooms them more than any sort of curse or punishment from the Valar themselves. I think it's really them, and they all get wrapped up in it. I think Fingolfin for sure. Fingon meets a very sticky end. Torgon doesn't, so nothing Fingon does really survives. Arathel has the one son who is a bad seed by all accounts, and she, so, perhaps it would have been better if she hadn't left any descendants, honestly. And she kind of dies, and her husband dies, and her son dies, all in kind of this tragic way. Argon, like we said, we know nothing about. We don't know what he did. He didn't
died, yeah.
But except that he died. And the only thing that remains of Turgon's realm, Turgon himself doesn't survive. Gondolin doesn't survive. It's totally destroyed. Idril and Tuor, who has, the express sort of blessing of Ulmo on him to find the chink in Fate's armor and sort of produce Eärendil. And the same thing with Finrod as well. Aegnor and Angrod, his brothers, don't really do anything. Orodreth is a terrible example of a Finwë. I have so many problems with him because he basically lets his people send his brother to his death knowingly and just kind of stands by and can't do anything. And then later, I don't think he makes terribly great decisions when Turin shows up at his door. So nothing, Orodreth dies, Nargothrond is obliterated. Finrod kind of escapes because he does he makes this heroic self-sacrifice for people who are, not really his kin. Luthien's sort of like a distant cousin, but this isn't his family, this isn't his line, these aren't the Noldor. He's just acting to help, his friend that he owes something to.
Yeah. And
therefore, even though he dies and all of his towers and fortresses are destroyed, just like everything else the Noldor start, and he leaves no blood descendants and no one to inherit. But he does have an inheritance of a sort, because without Finrod's help, Beren would have died, and there would be no son of Beren and Luthien, would be Dior, and of course Dior's descendant is Elwing, and who marries Eärendil, and we have, their children are Elrond and Elros, who found Numenor, and Elrond goes on to father Arwen. So Finrod's sacrifice lives on because he makes that sacrifice. He puts aside his pride in his powerful kingdom and his status in the lineage.
Unlike Turgon,
exactly. Yeah, he knows that he's going to have to sacrifice everything, and when the time comes, he willingly does it. So therefore, his actions actually matter, and none of the Noldor. This is going to sound terrible, but nothing the Noldor do in Arda really ends up mattering, except for just a handful of cases. And this
Galadriel.
But Galadriel, again, she's the exception. She's special. She's, have a quarter of Anyaran, and she marries Celeborn, and she repents, and and even then, Lorien does not persist. She doesn't leave really. Her descendants would be Arwen, but apart from marrying into the holy bloodline of half-elves, she doesn't really leave behind much of a legacy either. She tells Frodo, I'm Galadriel, and I came out of the West, and I'm here married to Celeborn, and we have this little realm of wood elves that we rule over, and we're holding off the shadow with the power of this ring, and it's encroaching on us daily, and when you destroy the ring, our time will be over, and we will pass away, and nothing of our, all of our struggles will remain. So apart from very few moments, nothing that the Noldor do ultimately ends up bearing any fruit. It doesn't really come to anything except more bloodshed and more betrayal and more sadness and pain and death, which is really depressing for me to say, because as you know, I love the Noldor and I love watching them, but futility is, I think, what they are cursed with more than anything.